Do you or a loved one struggle with PTSD? Our author today has a unique view on how it can help you, how mentoring can help you, and he wrote the book, You Are Not Alone. You're watching Books with Bridgetti. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Thanks for having me on your live show. It was really my pleasure. Your production is just fantastic. Unbelievable how you guys are pulling that off. So organized with segments and transitions and all those different things. Right in line with what I'm talking about in my new book, Going Live, live streaming your podcast to reach more people. Hopefully people tune in for our conversations. Definitely worth the on-demand version, in my opinion, if I may say so myself. You guys are awesome.
I think this might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months. And this has to be one of the most sophisticated, what the kids that I used to teach call bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It looks fantastic.
I love your introduction. How professional. That sounds, I feel like I'm on a beautiful show here.
Folks, welcome.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.
Oh my goodness, Ross, thank you so much.
Thanks. This is one of the most fun interviews that I've ever done. So thank you, Bridgetti.
Big pleasure. Ross, take care.
Thank you.
If you've just joined us, then welcome to Books with Bridgetti. If you've never watched the show before, one of the things that we love doing is helping people level up. Now, all authors out there some of them are starting to do in-person events and book signings. In person, getting to talk to your readers is a wonderful experience. However, COVID changed some things, and I don't think that a lot of it is going to change in the foreseeable future. Hybrid is likely here to stay with us for a long time. So a lot of authors, some for health reasons, are still going online and will continue to do so. And so one of the things I like doing on the show is showing you how you can level up while you are talking about your books online. Now, a lot of the authors use their phones when they go live to talk about their books. And so what you would naturally do, for example, is if you're going live on your phone on Instagram and on TikTok, you'd be holding your phone in portrait mode. And that's 100% correct, because those platforms will use the entire screen real estate when you're holding your phone in portrait mode. However, if you are going to go live to any of the other platforms like YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, when you are talking about your books, even on Amazon, and we are live on Amazon today as well, what you want to do is to take your phone and turn it into landscape mode. And the reason for that is you will notice if you're going live on one of the other platforms other than TikTok and Instagram, you'll have black lines on the side. And so turning your phone into landscape mode, go into your settings and turn off the rotation lock to enable you to turn your phone into landscape mode. The other thing you want to do is to use some kind of a tripod, any tripod. There are a variety of tripods around. You can literally take your pick if you're doing a bit of a walkabout, you want to possibly use something like the DJI Osmo it's a stabilizer, and it'll just make things so much easier. But here's a quick tip. If you are traveling, if you're in a hotel room out of your normal environment and you want to talk about your book, you can simply take your phone and use some sticky tape or press stick or something and put your phone onto a window. The reason why that is a good idea is because you'll have front-facing light. Because light coming from behind you will make you look dark and black, and your audience won't be able to see you. So if you tape your phone to a window with press stick or whatever, you will find also that your phone will be at the correct angle. And this is the angle that you should put your phone on when you are talking about your book and using a tripod. The other thing that you can do to level up is invest in a better microphone. It'll make a difference. And then, of course, you don't want to forget to use some earphones. There's so many to choose from. Take your pick. But that will avoid you getting sound feedback, for example. So do use that. And those are just a few quick tips that I have for you. Now, my amazing guest today is Doug Lawrence. And he is a certified, he's a speaker, an author, an international certified mentor, and the founder of a company called TalentC. He's also the co-founder of the International Mentor Community. We'll ask him a little bit about that. He helps organizations improve productivity and reduce employee onboarding, and we'll ask him what that means. Now, he's done extensive research on the effects of mentoring for people who live with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he's got a unique view on mentoring. His background is also that he served in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for 25 years, and he retired in 1999. And so, please, let's give a hearty welcome to our guest today, Doug Lawrence. Doug, a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining me in the studio today. I'm delighted to have you here. And I want to start right off by asking you, why did you want to help people with PTSD? Where did that come from?
So first off, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate this opportunity. And where this all came from was that as I was doing the research for my book, I basically had an epiphany where all of a sudden I realized that I too has, whichever word you want to use, experienced post-traumatic stress. And that I saw that there were opportunities for me to take what's very, very near and dear to my heart, what drives my passion, which is mentoring. I saw a way that I could take mentoring and make it part of the support structure for mental health, so post-traumatic stress. And that way there, I would be able to help others who are going on their healing journey to be able to deal with their PTSD experience.
Now, here's an interesting thing. Do you think that there are people that don't know that they have PTSD?
Oh, definitely. And I'm a perfect example of that, where I had no idea until I started to do my research and I went, yes, that's a behavior that I've exhibited. Oh, that's another one that I've exhibited. And I just kept kind of peeling back the onion skin, as I call it. And I started to see more and more of myself in what it was that the picture that they were painting for post-traumatic stress. I could see myself in that. And I'm going, okay, I guess I've got post-traumatic stress, and now what?
It's interesting that you say that, it's been an interesting journey for me, being able to talk to so many people, and I've discovered a lot about myself too in that process. So I can totally relate to what you are saying now. Do you think that as a society we are doing enough to even recognize? Can we start with a definition of what PTSD is, perhaps?
Yes, we can. Post-traumatic stress typically is something that, so it's very trauma related. So, and I'll give you a good example of one. I'll take my own personal example. So, I was I was stationed in a small northern location, and I got called to a sudden death, which turned out to be a death by suicide, death by suicide. And I had become very, very close to this person who had just recently done well and was being selected to be on a male men's hockey team, and we were going to go down play hockey against the neighboring community and stuff. And he went home to share his exciting, great news with his parents, only to find that they were inebriated and were not in any way, shape, or form in a place where they could acknowledge his well-being. So he took his own life, and I ended up having to transport his body out to the nearest hospital, the nearest morgue, and I still to this day I have flashbacks of that trip and of all of the stuff around that. And every so often I can be watching a TV show and it'll trigger a memory of that young person that I had been working with. And so when you take a look at what is post-traumatic stress, it's the body's reaction to an event that has already taken place, and now your body is trying to deal with that in whatever way that it can, and sometimes it can, and sometimes it ends up it's triggered, and you actually relive that experience all over again.
Yeah, I can well imagine. It's tough enough having to cope with this on your own, but now you're out in the workplace and you may be working with people and within situations that could trigger you. So could you talk a little bit about how PTSD impacts organizations and companies?
Certainly, because the easiest way for us to examine what is going to be the impact if one of our employees has post-traumatic stress. Well, what's going to end up happening is there's going to be extra sick time because that individual doesn't know how to deal with things, and so their anxiety, their depression, their stress level, all of those things kick into high gear, which then results in them quite possibly not being as productive of an employee as what they could. And then on top of that, you add all of the mental health, like I mentioned, dealing with stress, anxiety, and even to the point where, suicidal tendencies, all of those things now all of a sudden become a reality rather than just something we kind of talk about. And so it's very important for organizations to, number one, be in a position to be able to acknowledge that, and then to be able to just come up with a strategy or a plan on how they're going to deal with it as an organization. Setting aside the whole idea of, we actually have two pillars. We have the organization, but we also have the employee. So we need to be able to sort of figure out, okay, what's the impact on the organization? What's the impact on the person? And then what coping mechanisms for both are we going to be able to put into practice or into place?
And so we've got, we know that there are consequences of not treating PTSD in the workplace, and perhaps you can expand a little bit on the consequences for an organization. But is all mentoring equal? I know that may be a bit of a loaded question, but there's mentoring and there's mentoring. But in terms of PTSD, is that different in can just anyone step in and mentor people in terms of PTSD? What has been your experience?
The short answer is no. That I did, how I prepared myself for that. Number one was I've experienced post-traumatic stress. I've talked to a lot of people around the whole idea of, how could I provide value? How could I help you? How could I be part of your coping mechanism as a mentor and be able to move forward? And then what sort of training is available? And I've done some trauma related courses. I've done suicide intervention. I've done a number of different training courses in order to better prepare myself to be able to deal with those situations if and when they come up. To jump into that whole situation without the benefit of any training or without the benefit of lived experience, I think you would not only be doing yourself some disservice, but you'd also be doing the person that you're trying to mentor. You would definitely be doing disservice to that individual as well.
I can well imagine. Now, from what I understand, is that you run a training program. Is that correct?
So we do, yes, we do. We are able to provide training to mentors, and we can provide training to people that just want to mentor. Like, don't throw any of this mental health stuff at me or anything. I want to know how I can provide a deeper, richer mentoring experience. And so what tools, concepts, processes, what are all the things I need to be aware of in order to be able to do that? And then the other aspect is that is what does it take for me to be able to be comfortable in order to mentor someone who is dealing with a mental health challenge, who is going through a healing journey of their own? What are some of the things that I need to be aware of in order to be able to bring value to that relationship?
And so you wrote the book, You're Not Alone. Why did you want to write the book? Who was it intended for, and how does it help people?
So the book was written based on input that I got from some of my colleagues who have seen some of the work that I have done and said that you need to write a book and provide people with the tools that you already have that you're putting into practice. And so I started to do some research, and I found that yes, there's lots of books written on the academic perspective of mentoring and mental health, but there wasn't a lot that were written from the aspect of the practical application of that knowledge, those lived experiences, all of those things. And so that was the angle that I took to write, was with You Are Not Alone. It is very specific on the aspect of mentoring needs to be part of the support structure for mental health, and understanding what some of the characteristics of a great mentor, understanding what those characteristics are and how can they be of value, those very same characteristics, how can they be of value to somebody who is working with somebody who has post-traumatic stress.
Do you have the book with you? Because I wanted to, the cover is just amazing. And I think it kind of illustrates what people with PTSD are up against. I'm going to put you on full screen for a sec so you can show that. Talk a little bit about the cover and how that came about.
So I have a absolutely marvelous graphic designer that it took us a couple goes to get this to where we are, but he's phenomenal, and he was the one that designed this, and then he even made a few modifications so that we could capture the Amazon #1 bestseller once we got advised that we had in fact made #1 bestseller. But the idea behind this is that if you take a look, you'll see you actually you've got two shadows here. And the idea behind this is that you have a choice. There are options open to you as an individual who's dealing with their own personal trauma and stuff like that. And the idea with the forks in the road, and one side's a little darker than the other, and there's more light on the other side. So you have a choice, a decision to make as to whether you want to continue your journey on to the dark side, or whether you want to continue your journey to where there's light. And that's the idea behind the cover, and you're going to do that with the two people that you see back here. That's why the book is entitled You Are Not Alone, because you're not on that journey by yourself.
Wow, that's amazing. I've looked at that cover so many times, but I actually never noticed the two shadows.
Yeah.
It's really only now that you pointed that out, and it's amazing the significance behind the two shadows, because I think that's often also the dilemma for people suffering with PTSD, is that you always feel that there's nobody out there in the world who could possibly understand what you're going through or relate to your unique experience. And so just on that thought, this is something I personally often talk about, is that people can sometimes unintentionally invalidate our experience. I personally, I don't know about how you feel about that, but I personally have an intense dislike for when people say to me, even when they say it to other people and I hear them say it, I intensely dislike the phrase, "I know how you feel."
Yeah. I'm the same. And you know what? Where I've gotten to now is rather than say that, I would rather somebody turn to me and say, "I am so sorry. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say." And I will guide them. I will guide them on, why don't you ask me about this? Why don't you let me share this experience with you? Let me guide you in a conversation down this path. And so what I try to do is then they don't go and sort of exactly how you would put it was, I know exactly how you feel. No, you don't. You have no clue whatsoever what I'm going through. And I'm here, we all deal with grief in our own particular way. We all deal with the loss of a loved one. And here's a fact that a lot of people don't get, but is that if I lose my loved one, my partner that was supposed to be my partner for life, that's different than if I were to have lost my mother or my father, my brother, my sister. It's a different type of grief, and it will hit you harder if it's your loved one, your significant other that you've lost, because it's like cutting off an appendage off your body.
Yeah. And here's the kicker for me. Even if I had also lost my significant other, it's like when somebody says, I've lost my mom or my dad, and somebody says, gosh, I lost my mom a year ago too, and it still feels like yesterday. I know exactly how you feel. And I'm like, no, you don't. Because my relationship with my father was different to your relationship with your father. And so your sense of loss cannot possibly be the same as mine. And, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the same happens when you lose a significant other, because so much of how you feel would depend on the kind of relationship you had with your significant other. Am I correct?
Yeah,
Or what's your sense on that?
no, you're absolutely right. Is that, you look around you and you see married couples, for example, and you see some who have got this deep, burning, passionate relationship, and you go, that you just sort of, you are appreciative of what that actually means. And then over here, you'll see somebody who, is they work well together, they get along well together, but the all of those elements that I mentioned are maybe not at the same level, and so it's two different stories, so to speak. Each one that has, that how people react to the relationship itself is going to be completely different.
Hmm.
You know,
100%. I'm very sensitive to that, and I'm very sensitive to how it will make people feel when somebody invalidates their story. I will usually sort of step up and try and say something because I know how that has affected me in the past. And because I am acutely aware of it, I want to step in for other people that may not have the vocabulary at the time, because it does take time. I was reading about a friend's loss the other day. I think it's 2 years now since she's lost her life partner, and she was madly in love with him. And she was talking about how you don't even know, you suddenly have this label, widow or widower. What is it? What does it even mean? I still feel married. I still feel like I've got my partner. What is this label you're trying to give me? Have I gone back from a mister to a master? What am I? How do I define myself? All the emotions when you see other couples shopping, everything about your life has changed. And so you have this almost ongoing trauma, is it not?
well, it is, and you've touched on an interesting point, because one of the things that you can be categorized by is widow brain. And what that basically is, and I've experienced it, so I know exactly what it's like, but it's, you end up where you're in a fog, is basically the best way to describe it. And I'll wander around the house, and I know I have to go someplace in the house to get something, because that's why I got up from my chair to go and get there. But I don't really know why I'm doing it, and so, for example, I'll go down into the basement of my house to get something, and I'll get down to the bottom of the stairs, and I'll ask myself, now, why did you come down here? And I don't have an answer. And it's because I've lost my ability, albeit hopefully only minor, but I've lost my ability to to cognitively stay focused on what it is I'm doing and why I'm doing things. And I've talked to lots of people. I'm part of a bereavement group that we have these conversations all the time about the whole widow brain storyline, and it's unnerving. It's very scary, because what's to preclude me from hopping in my vehicle and taking off and go for a drive, because I think I'm going to the grocery store, but when I get there, I don't know what it is that I want to get. And so then I drive home. When I get home, I pull my vehicle into the garage, and then I go, well, I was supposed to get some milk. And so you go through all of this whole disturbing storyline of, why can't I remember things? Why are all these things happening that I don't seem to have control over?
So do you cover coping mechanisms in the book, Doug?
So the You Are Not Alone speaks specifically to laying the foundation for mentoring to be part of the support structure for mental health. And there are some elements in there from as a mentor here are some of the coping tools that you may need to have as a mentor, but you can also share these tools with the person that you're working with as well. And then I am planning on, and I'm partway through writing another book that will take a deeper dive into the whole aspect of the widow brain and all of those things that we've been just talking about now, just because it's a excuse me, it's a natural, if there is ever such a thing, a natural progression to go from You Are Not Alone to the next book and kind of bring that all along the way, because they fit together very, very nicely.
And so the mentoring program, I remember this. You talked about something about having mentoring champions within an organization. Tell me a little bit about, what is a mentoring champion and how do you become one?
So typically when I go into an organization to help them establish mentoring as part of their organizational culture, what I like them to do is I like them to sort of, one of the reasons programs fail is because there's a lack of training and there's 4 reasons: lack of corporate support, lack of structure, lack of training, and a culture that won't support mentoring. And so we try to address all of those. But one of the things when it comes to the training part is we encourage people to take some sort of training. It doesn't have to be the Cadillac. It doesn't have to be the Chev. It could be a 1 hour or 2 hour workshop on mentoring that will provide you with the basic fundamentals that you need in order to bring value to the rest of your organization. But here's to specifically answer your question, the mentoring champion is going to be one of your advocates for mentoring within your organization. And it's going to be somebody that you may want to invest some additional time. So you may want them to become certified and go through the certification process that the international mentoring community offers. That may be a path that you may want that person to go through, because they are sort of the champion for the mentoring process in the organization.
So ideally, how long is this program? If it's not just a short course, is there a defined length of time to invest into this program?
Yes, you're probably looking at anywhere from, because each person is different, but I'm going to say at a minimum 3 months and at a maximum 6 months, where you would come away from that journey and you would be certified.
And then do you do refresher courses from time to time, or is it an ongoing thing?
It depends. It depends which path you take. So if you take the Certificate of Practice Mentor program, if you go through that program, you have to recertify every 2 years. So there's a recertification component that you have to adhere to, which is every 2 years, you basically go back through the process again and update as we call it, update your portfolio. So all your new lived experiences and that will be added into the documentation and stuff so that it stays current and relevant and all of that, and that you're able to use those experiences to actually verify that you are, for the most part, a competent mentor.
I can imagine the value of doing that, because even though you've been trained to use the tools to mentor others, on some level, correct me if I'm wrong, on some level, working with people with PTSD on a continuous basis would necessitate that you take care of yourself too.
Yeah. Self-care is extremely important, especially when you're mentoring individuals who are dealing with their own mental health challenges, because what happens is you take all of their energy in, and especially when you're dealing with the mental health aspect, a lot of that energy is not something that you want to keep inside. So then you as an individual, from a self-care, you need to be able to figure out, how am I going to clear my body of that negative energy, and do so excuse me, and do so in a fashion that it works for the best for both of us.
Yeah, I can totally, just from a practical perspective, see how that would work. Here's a question. We've just barely out of COVID. Have you seen that there's, was there a shift in the amount of people dealing with PTSD? I'm just wondering, are there people who, because we were isolated for such a long time, were there more people that realized they had PTSD? Did COVID cause people to have PTSD? What's your sense on that?
Well, it did definitely cause people to develop post-traumatic stress, most definitely. And a good example of that is, you take a husband and wife who were forced to work from home because of COVID restrictions at their organization. So their company said, okay, everybody's got to work from home, do so accordingly. So they had to carve up the house in order to be able to sort of say, okay, well, I have conference calls that I need to be part of, and I need to be part of those, and they're from this time to this time, and so you're going to have to be quiet or do something, but that's my time. And then the wife would turn around and say, well, that's okay, I can do that, but my calls are from this time to this time. And then we take all of that we've had to juggle, and the stress of doing so, and the anxiety of, what if I miss a call because my husband was ran over, and all that sort of stuff. Then on top of it all, we throw the biggest curveball that there ever was thrown, which is, now we want you to homeschool your children. And so then all of a sudden we've got all this added stress, all this added anxiety. Is, okay, whose turn is it today to help little Johnny do math, and little Sally do, social studies and all that sort of, who's going to be doing that when we've got our own stuff we have to deal with as well? And so the short answer is, oh yes, there was a huge huge impact on everybody when it came to the aspect of, what's the impact of post-traumatic stress, COVID, on, even the household as a whole.
The other, just listening to you now, and COVID, and sort of thinking about, even my own experiences during COVID, and how that would have had an impact on PTSD, or even caused PTSD, is, generally speaking, if you lost your job, if you lost someone in your life, you would have support structures in place. Humans, we want to touch, we want to feel, we want to hug, we want to have dinners together. And COVID took all of that away from us. So those of us who lost loved ones during COVID, I know from myself. At one point, I was doing Zoom memorials every Saturday for weeks. And sometimes it was 2 or 3 Zoom memorials a day. And I felt at some point, can this just stop for a bit so I can grieve for one person at a time? Because I felt I was grieving for multiple people all at the same time. How do you do that? I don't think we had the tools or the coping mechanisms to do that. How do you grieve for so many people all at the same time? It's impossible.
And it's interesting you should bring that up, because this morning I'm checking my social media feeds, and 2 more people have been taken away from us because of cancer. And the every time you turn around now, and I made this comment to somebody else this morning, I said every time I turn around, I'm beginning to develop a distaste for Facebook and other places, because that's where all my news feeds are coming from, some of those social media platforms, and typically I'm not able to get through the day without being notified that so-and-so has passed away, or so-and-so lost a major battle with cancer, or so-and-so passed away and left behind a whole bunch of grandchildren and great-grandchildren and all that. And I'm going exactly how you're feeling. I'm going, is okay, when, excuse me, when is this ride going to stop, and when can I get off?
Yeah, I think you almost feel like you're on a bus or a train you don't want to be on.
It's like
you're on this moving thing that just won't stop, and you're like, can you stop the bus for just a second? I need a breath.
Well, and what's also interesting, because you talked about job loss, we grieve when we lose our jobs. There is a grief process that we go through when we lose our jobs. So you take, we're grieving because close friends and associates have lost a loved one, and so we're not sure, how can we help? What can we do? And you're constantly trying to be mindful of what I shouldn't say and what I could say and all that. And then you've got your own situations where, you've lost someone in your own family that you're having to deal with, and it just keeps building and building and building. And eventually, if we don't practice enough self-care, that's when we start to crumble as a human being. We start to crumble, and we start to, we're all of a sudden now we're dealing with stress, we're dealing with anxiety, we're dealing with depression. So, it's a matter of, what do I need to do to be able to put safety nets in place to make sure I don't go, too far to the right.
Yeah, absolutely. And just listening to you now is remembering how many companies went out of business. There were companies that had been in families for centuries. Yeah. Well-established organizations that just could not weather the storm of COVID. So the impact that it had on the employees, the impact that it had on the business owners, the families who owned those businesses for decades. We didn't have time to think, and everything happened so fast. That ship just sunk so quickly. Doors just closed in our faces so quickly. And some will never recover. And so, programs like this, I think, is going to become more and more invaluable to organizations. Maybe you can talk for a bit about, what is the cost to companies who don't take care of their workforce that's suffering from PTSD?
Well, you have lost productivity, and you end up with higher, what's the word I'm looking for? So lost productivity, your medical costs within the company start to climb because you're having to spend more money to try to keep healthy employees in the workplace when it doesn't always work. People become disengaged in the workplace because they're focusing on what's going on in my life and how am I going to deal with that, and I've lost this loved one and I've lost that one, and so they're struggling and dealing with all of these things that are going on, and they're not focusing on the job that they were hired to do. So and organizations are not, they have no. I remember I had a conversation with a colleague one time, and asked me what I was doing, and I explained the whole mental health and mentoring thing, and they said we should have you come in, and because we've got an employee that is dealing with anxiety and depression and that. And I asked the question, so if I don't come in there and provide assistance, who does? And they said, well, really no one, because the company is just, they've decided we'll try and work through this as best we can. And as it turns out, I said, just give me a call and I'll come in, and I can even just have a talk, with your supervisor to sort of outline some of the things that we can probably take a look at, and maybe even some things that you folks can do without me being there and stuff like that. And just, there was no interest whatsoever. It was, we'll figure out, we'll navigate through it on our own. And so there's an opportunity there to make a difference in someone's life that we've just kind of pushed out the window and sort of said, well, they'll have to figure it out on their own. And at least they're aware that there's an issue, because when I remember in my time in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, that there was nothing like that whatsoever. It was, you kind of sink or swim, dive in the deep end of the pool, and hopefully you're going to be able to swim out on your own, because there was no, I call it debriefing. So for a major traumatic event, like the example I gave of the young lad taking his own life, there was no debriefing. There was nothing, let's talk about what took place, and, and the aspect of, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to put some mechanisms in place. If we need to, we'll get you some professional help. None of that happened.
Do you think the police service is doing more for workers now than they did back when you were serving with them?
They are. There's, you take a look at lots of veteran organizations that are providing the counseling and access to professional services, psychologists, psychiatrists, all of those. It is better, but I've also had people that have told me that it's better to a certain extent, Doug, but it's not totally where it needs to get to. And part of the issue is that I don't know that we fully understand the timing as to when we need to step in and provide that sort of professional help. And we also don't understand the mentoring aspect of it. I know a lot of organizations I did some work with one organization, and part of what we built into the training for mentors who are going to be mentoring employees was an understanding of mental health. And so walking people through, this is what post-traumatic stress is, this is anxiety, this is depression, and here's some of the things that you could do if you're comfortable. Here are some of the things you could do that it's going to help that individual with their healing journey and be able to do that. And I'm very proud of what they have put in place and what they continue to put into place, even even to this day.
Well, I'm glad that there are some changes taking place.
Yeah. Yes, most definitely. A little baby step at a time.
Well, anything is better than nothing. You know. So, Doug, if you can hold up your book just one last time before we say goodbye to our audience, and if you can just tell me, specifically who will benefit from reading this book?
So the person or people that would benefit from reading this is, number one, your mentor. So somebody who wants to be involved in the mentoring process and to specifically be working with individuals who have mental health challenges. So that's number one. Number two is organizations. This would be a great read for people who are decision makers in the organization that don't fully comprehend or understand what it is that their responsibility is as an organization to their employees. And then the other part is that because there is a facet or an element of the mentor certification process, somebody who is thinking about, gee, I wonder if I should become a certified mentor, and I wonder what's in it for me. This book will shed some light on some of that as well. And then, somebody who is themselves going through some mental health challenges, this is a great book because it gives you some reassurance as to there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are people, when you take a look, I do have a choice to make. I've got, the two individuals, I'm at a crossroads. I do have a decision that I need to make or I could make. And when you pick up this book and you start to go through and you read it, it's going to become a lot clearer to you what some of those decisions might be and who you may turn to get some guidance and help in being able to do that. And like a lot of people have said to me, it's a very easy read. It's a couple 100 and some odd pages. So it's time well spent.
Doug, thank you so much. It was great having you on the show with us today. Thank you for sharing some of your stories and experiences and insights on mentoring. And we definitely love to have you back when is your next book due? Do you have an idea yet? Or do you have a plan for its release?
I'm targeting February.
Well, all the best with that, and we'd definitely love to have you back again to talk about your new book. So to our audience who's joined us live today, a huge big thank you to each one of you. And also, if you are watching the show on the rerun, which most people do, then welcome, and do watch the entire show because there was a lot of valuable gems that we shared in this broadcast. So thanks, everyone. Doug, thank you so much, and would love to have you back again.
Thank you very much.
Big pleasure. Take care, everyone. Stay well. We'll see you back on the next episode of Books with Bridgetti.